She signed the papers with a smile. That was the part nobody talked about. Not the 12 years. Not the house. Not the way Jordan Maddox slid the divorce documents across the conference table like he was closing a deal on a parking lot. He'd even said it out loud. Sign there and there. Don't forget to smile. So Avery signed. And she smiled. And then she walked out of that building without turning around once. 3 years later, the envelope showed up. Avery was standing at her kitchen island when Priya dropped it on the counter. Cream-colored. Heavy stock. Gold letters pressed into the front. Mr. Jordan Maddox and Ms. Tessa Wren request the honor of your presence. She didn't move for a full 5 seconds. Priya read over her shoulder. Twice. Then said, "He didn't." "He did," Avery said quietly. She turned the envelope over. On the back, in Jordan's tight, controlled handwriting, was a single line he'd added himself. "Thought you should see what moving on looks like." Avery set the envelope down. She didn't crumple it. She didn't throw it. She just stood there, very still, while something settled over her face that Priya had only seen once before. The last time, a rival firm had tried to poach her entire development team. That firm no longer existed. Avery picked up her phone and made one call. "Dre," she said. "Clear my Saturday." 3 years earlier, Avery had left their shared penthouse with 2 suitcases and $40,000 she'd saved without Jordan ever knowing. He'd always handled the money, always reminded her gently, casually, in the way that sounds like a compliment until you realize it isn't, that she wasn't a business mind. She hadn't argued. She hadn't fought over the furniture or the accounts or the vacation house in Charleston. She'd looked at him and said, "Keep it, all of it." He thought that meant she was broken. Took him 3 years to understand that Avery Cole didn't fight over things she'd already decided to leave behind. She started her company from a rented desk in a co-working space in Brooklyn. No investors, no family money, no name behind her that meant anything in a room full of people who'd already decided she was nobody. She built anyway. By the end of year 1, her real estate development firm had cleared its first acquisition. By year 2, she had a floor in a building she didn't own yet. By year 3, she owned the building. She named the company Cole Ventures. It was worth $120 million on the morning Priya handed her that envelope. Jordan, meanwhile, had spent 3 years telling the story differently. She never recovered. He'd say, swirling his drink, voice dropping into something that sounded almost like sympathy but wasn't. "Some women just fall apart after a divorce. Nothing you can do." His groomsmen had heard the story so many times they could finish it. Avery was bitter. Avery was stuck. Avery spent her days replaying everything she'd lost. Tessa had heard it on their 3rd date. She'd nodded, wide-eyed, and said, "Poor thing." Jordan had smiled. That was exactly the response he'd wanted. He sent the invitation because he wanted Avery to see the estate, the bride, the flowers, the statement of a man who had not just moved on but upgraded. He wanted her to sit in those white chairs and feel every inch of what she'd walked away from. He had absolutely no idea what she'd become. "Don't," Dre said. He was standing in the doorway of her bedroom, arms folded. He had worked as her head of security for 2 years. He knew every version of Avery Cole. This version, quiet, still, eyes fixed on the mirror, was the one that made him nervous. "Don't what?" she said. "The face. You're doing the face." She looked at her reflection. Champagne silk. Natural hair pinned close, a few strands loose. No dramatic jewelry. Nothing that demanded attention. Just clean, precise, impossibly put together. She looked expensive in the way that required no explanation. "I'm going to a wedding," she said. "You're going to his wedding." She turned from the mirror. "Dre, what do I always say?" He exhaled slowly. "You don't go to battles. You go to conclusions." "Exactly." She picked up her clutch. "He wanted me to see what he built." She walked toward the elevator without looking back. "Let's go see what I built." The Keller estate was the kind of venue that made people forget themselves. 200 guests. White floral archways stretching toward the sky. A string quartet that had flown in from somewhere expensive. Champagne towers. The kind of afternoon engineered to make every attendee feel that wealth was inevitable, that this was simply how things went for people like Jordan Maddox. He was near the entrance, greeting arrivals, when the first black SUV rolled through the gate, then a second, then a third, all tinted, all moving in quiet, unhurried coordination. They parked in a line so precise it looked deliberate. Because it was. The doors opened. Two men stepped out first. Suits, earpieces, the kind of posture you only get from people who've been trained to watch rooms. Two more stepped out from the third vehicle. They didn't cluster. They spread, forming a loose perimeter that most guests wouldn't consciously recognize but would instinctively feel. Then the middle door opened. Avery Cole stepped out. She didn't rush. She didn't scan the crowd. She simply stood, let the afternoon light land on the silk, and walked forward like she had somewhere specific to be. A woman near the fountain leaned toward her husband. "Who is that?" He had no answer. Jordan, 30 feet away, stopped moving entirely. The champagne glass in his hand suddenly felt very heavy. Tessa appeared at his elbow before he could collect himself. "Jordan, it's fine. Who is she?" He kept his voice even. "Nobody." But nobody didn't arrive with 4 bodyguards and 3 private vehicles. And every person on that lawn knew it. The whispers spread faster than the welcome drinks. "She runs some kind of company. International. Real estate. That's his ex-wife? I heard it cleared 9 figures last quarter." Avery moved through the garden like she'd organized the event herself. She complimented the florist on the arrangements. She greeted strangers with the ease of someone who'd walked into 100 rooms where nobody knew her name and left with all of them knowing it. She accepted sparkling water, not champagne. She stood near the stone fountain, unhurried, unreadable. A woman so comfortable with herself that comfort looked like power. Dre stayed 8 feet behind her. He always did. It was Jordan's mother who reached her first. Nora Maddox was 71 years old, silver-haired, and sharper than most people half her age. She crossed the garden with her hands folded and stopped in front of Avery like she was approaching something she needed to assess carefully. "Avery." "Nora." Avery smiled. "Genuine. You look beautiful." Nora studied her. The silk, the stillness, the quiet authority of a woman who no longer needed anyone's approval and had stopped pretending otherwise. Something shifted in Nora's face. It wasn't quite guilt. It wasn't quite pride. It was somewhere complicated between the two. "You've done well," Nora said softly. "I have," Avery agreed. No performance. No false modesty. Just the clean, simple truth. Nora glanced back toward her son, who stood 20 feet away watching them, jaw tight. Then she looked at Avery again. "He told people you were struggling," Nora said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Avery turned her water glass slowly. "People tend to see what they expect to see." She smiled once more. Then she drifted away, leaving Nora standing in place, thinking. "She came with a security team," Tessa said. Her voice was low and controlled, but only barely. "To our wedding, Jordan." "Drop it. That woman has 4 bodyguards. Why does your ex-wife have 4 bodyguards?" Jordan had been dreading this since the first SUV came through the gate. He'd imagined this day so specifically. Avery arriving quietly, taking a back seat, watching his happiness from a polite distance and carrying the weight of everything she'd given up. He had not imagined this. "She's always been dramatic," he said. "That's not drama." Tessa's eyes tracked Avery across the garden. "That's infrastructure. Jordan, she's not dressed like a guest. She's dressed like the person who booked the venue." "You're overthinking. My mother just asked me if she was a celebrity." Tessa's voice cracked on the last word. "At my wedding." Jordan reached for her hand. She let him take it, but her eyes didn't leave Avery. "Why did you invite her?" He opened his mouth. He closed it, because the honest answer was that he'd wanted Avery to hurt. He'd wanted her to sit in those white chairs and feel the specific ache of a woman watching the life she'd thrown away become someone else's highlight reel. But the woman standing 40 feet away, surrounded by security, lit up like the skyline at midnight. She wasn't hurting. She hadn't lost anything. The question that crept in next, the one he didn't want, had he? He made his first mistake when he walked over to her. She was seated near the garden's edge, alone for a moment, water glass in hand. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. No flinch, no intake of breath. Just her eyes, steady, calm, giving nothing away. "Jordan," she said. He sat down without meaning to. "You look," he stopped. "Like someone who's doing well?" she offered. He shifted in his chair. "I wanted you to come. I thought. You thought it would hurt me. It wasn't a question." She said it simply, the way you state a fact about the weather. He said nothing. "I know." Her voice was quiet. It wasn't cruel. That was the part that undid him. It wasn't cruel at all. "You wrote it on the invitation, Jordan. You wanted me to see. And—" his voice came out tighter than he intended. She tilted her head slightly. "And I see a beautiful venue. A lovely bride who deserves better than a man who invites his ex-wife to wound her." She paused. "And I see you." She let a beat of silence sit between them. "Exactly where I left you." He frowned. "I've built. I know what you've built." She picked up her water glass. "I built more." She wasn't saying it to cut him. She said it the way someone reads a number off a page. Factual. Finished. Final. That was the part that broke something open in him. His best man, Cam, found him walking away from the table, jaw locked. "Hey, you good?" "Fine. She's your ex-wife." "I know who she is, Cam." Cam held up his phone. Jordan stopped walking. On the screen, Avery Cole, founder and CEO of Cole Ventures. Forbes feature. 9-figure valuation. International acquisitions across 3 continents. Jordan stared at it. Cam lowered the phone slowly. "You told me she never recovered from the divorce." Jordan said nothing. "You said she was struggling, man." "She was." His voice came out hollow. 3 years ago. Cam looked back toward Avery. She was laughing softly at something Nora had returned to say. Nora, who never laughed at weddings. "That woman," Cam said quietly, "has not been struggling for a long time." The string quartet began to tune again nearby. Guests drifted toward the ceremony chairs. The whole afternoon was moving forward, arranged and on schedule. Jordan stood still. He'd built this day to mean something, to be a statement, to be the image that haunted Avery Cole for years. But the woman he'd invited to break was sitting in the golden light, whole, unhurried, magnificent. Not watching him, not watching anything in particular, just existing comfortably in a world that had kept moving without him. He remembered the line he'd written on her invitation. "Thought you should see what moving on looks like." He pressed his eyes shut. Avery stood before the ceremony began. Dre was beside her before she'd fully straightened. No signal, no word, just presence. 3 tables of guests looked up at the same moment. She smoothed her silk, placed a small ivory envelope on the table with 2 fingers, picked up her clutch. She didn't make a scene. She never made scenes. She left the way she'd arrived, with complete quiet control. Her detail fell into formation around her. The sound of gravel under their feet was the only announcement. Guests parted without being asked. At the entrance arch, an older man she didn't recognize stepped forward. "You're leaving?" "Before the ceremony." "I came to pay my respects," she said pleasantly. He blinked. "It's a wedding." But she was already moving. Inside the first SUV, Priya was already on a call. "Tell the Cape Town team she's available Monday. Confirm the Paris dinner Thursday. Push the Zurich call to 7. Avery leaned her head back against the headrest. She closed her eyes. She had done what she came to do. Nothing. And everything. Jordan found the envelope after the ceremony. He'd been smiling for 4 hours. Toasts, photos, the first dance, the careful performance of a man celebrating his best moment. He stepped away from the reception tent for 1 minute. The envelope was still on the garden table where she'd left it. Ivory. Her initials pressed into the seal. C. Not AM. Hadn't been AM for 3 years. He opened it alone. Inside, a single card. No speech. No venom. No triumph. Just 2 lines in her clean, precise handwriting. Thank you for the invitation. I hope you find in this marriage everything you were never willing to build in ours. And below that, smaller, like an afterthought that wasn't. I forgave you a long time ago. That's why I could come. He read it 3 times. Cam found him standing there, card in hand, the noise of the reception bleeding out from the tent behind him. Toasts are starting. Jordan folded the card carefully, slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket against his chest. He didn't know why he kept it there. He walked back to his bride. Back to the flowers and the music and the architecture of a day designed to declare his success. But something had changed. Quietly, without drama, in the space that Avery Cole had occupied for 90 minutes before leaving without looking back. Back in the city, Avery stood at her window. The skyline blinked and shifted below her. 17 unread messages waited on her phone. Partners, advisors, a journalist requesting an interview. Her life ran at a frequency she'd had to teach herself to hear. On the drive home, Priya had asked, "Was it worth going?" Avery had taken her time. She'd gone because she needed to know. Not to hurt Jordan. Not to display herself. Not even to prove anything to anyone watching. She'd needed to know if the old ache was still in there somewhere. The one that lived in the corner of 12 years and shared Sunday mornings and the slow, quiet drain of a life spent making herself smaller so someone else could feel larger. She stood at the window now and checked herself. Carefully, the way a doctor presses gently on a healed scar to see if it still hurts. Didn't. There was something else where the ache used to be. Quieter. Warmer. Something that felt like arriving somewhere you've been trying to get to for a very long time. She picked up her phone and called her mother. "How was it?" her mother asked. Avery watched the city below, all those lights burning steady in the dark. "He wanted me to see what moving on looks like," she said softly. A beat of silence. "I think I showed him." She paused. "And then I came home to mine. The most dangerous thing you can do to someone who built their identity on your pain is show up whole." Avery didn't compete. She didn't collapse. She just became. And let that be enough.